everybody's all set, we'll get going here. My name is Skolfield. I'm the Senior Sergeant at the Sagadahoc County Sheriff's Office. I've been in law enforcement for right around 31 years. Over 26 of those years have been right at the Sagadahoc County Sheriff's Office. I've held a multitude of roles while at the Sheriff's Office. And as most of you know, yes, I am the one that was given the call by the Army Reserve to check on Robert Card, September of 2023. We're going to talk to you about a few things here today. You're going to meet Bob Staples and John Nutting, and there's something we want to have brought to your attention, and or some of the things that could have been changed to potentially have had a different outcome last October. Before I start, first, I'd like to say how sorry I am to the victims and their families for all that they have gone through. I wish something was done differently on a number of different levels that could have changed the outcome. I wish that I had more information to act on so that I or someone or anyone could have acted differently. Secondly, I'm not here to sway votes in November in any way. I will not lower myself to the governor's standards. I want the public to know the truth about what happened last September. Thirdly, I want you, the members of the public, to know. Sorry. You're all good. Thirdly, I want members of the public to know what the governor has suppressed in not promoting the progressive treatment program enacted into law in 2003, which could have very well changed the events that occurred in Lewiston last October. I've been contacted by several individuals within our community. Many of them are from the Democratic Party, and they are not happy with Governor Mills and the Lewiston Commission's findings. I was told the Commission's report was portrayed in such a way with significant omissions to include excluding exculpatory evidence being left out, to deflect off of her own failures as governor of the state of Maine. I was told the governor was partly to blame for the tragedy. As I was told this, even I was skeptical of this line of thinking until Governor Mills' press conference on September 6th, when she took this horrible tragedy and made it into a political sideshow. When she strongly hinted to voters this fall who to consider who they voted for Sagadahoc County Sheriff. A despicable and abhorrent act, to say the least, on the governor's part. Governor Mills' speech shows that the investigation by her hand-picked commission was in fact politically motivated and not about displaying the unvarnished facts, as she purported. The investigation did not show all of the unvarnished facts. They only displayed what they wanted to support her in the commission's agenda to deflect. This became clear to anyone with even average intelligence who watched Mills when she addressed Mainers on September 6th in that news conference. And now we know why. If you hang on, we'll get to that, and we'll explain why a little bit further in a moment. I will give a brief sample here today with proof, not hollow words, that the commission had evidence which they failed to share with the public. The motivation here was to deflect off of her own, Governor Mills's, callous neglect and failures. As governor, to protect Mainers by not promoting the progressive treatment program, which, as mentioned earlier, was enacted into law in 2003. Retired Senator John Nutting will expand on what the governor has done to subdue the progressive treatment program under her watch, both as Attorney General and now governor. There are many things wrong with the Independent Commission's report. Unvarnished facts were purposely omitted to deceive you, the people of Maine. There are many things wrong with the Independent Commission's report. For those that even do a minimal amount of investigating on the internet, you will see it became clear through evidence that I was not on scene trying to reach Robert Card for just 16 minutes, but rather hours. The commission knew that. The governor and the commission lied to you. I know these are monumental words calling out big hitters in their respective fields. Here, blown up in front of you, you'll find pages from the commission's report. You'll find page 50, 51, and 52. Please take note of what is missing from the timeline, which paints a very different picture from what was portrayed to you. By the governor and her handpicked commission. Here are my phone records from September 15th, 16th, and 17th. And if you look at them, they go backwards. I did what's called a cell phone dump. And you'll see you have to start on the right-hand page and start at the bottom and work your way up, reading backwards, essentially, to follow the timeline. It's the way the report just happens to be generated. Those phone records show a significant amount of effort that was put into reaching Robert Card. Until what? What changed my mind? It was until I spoke to two members of the Army Reserve. The complainant, Sergeant Kelvin Moat, who waited over 7 hours to have his concerns vicariously reported to me through a coworker at the Ellsworth PD. Remember, this is the guy who testified he was so concerned the hairs on the back of his neck stood up and he immediately jumped into action and called Captain Reamer, but he waited over 7 hours. That's what he testified to. I also spoke to his superior, Captain Reamer. I was told by both of them that Sergeant Hodgson had credibility issues. Why was Captain Reamer's comment, which was captured on cruiser camera, of having to take Sergeant Hodgson's complaint with a grain of salt omitted from the Commission's report?
And that initially came when we went to try to fact check it. The text message, the guy who sent it out, he was unable to even give specifics during that. So I don't know where the validity of the text messages, okay. But there was enough that we were concerned and needed to do a check well-being and stuff like that because of his history and our understanding of it. Okay. And obviously, when anyone texts anything like that, we obviously need to take it very seriously, but also taking it with a grain of salt as well. Right.
That was the second time that Hodgson's credibility was mentioned to me. You'll notice a few things here. So going into, notice my phone records first. We'll start with those and what I knew at the time. I'm on scene in the morning, a little before 9 o'clock. I call the communication center in Augusta, ask for another unit, have some phone calls. My own communication center. I call Two Bridges Regional Jail. During this time, I've tried to make contact with Mr. Card. I never leave the scene. I'm on scene this entire time, and if that cruiser cam video that you see, I'm not standing outside his door the whole way, but I'm staring at the end of his driveway the whole time. I'm either in his driveway or staring at the end of it. The Commission omits that from their report. You've got to ask yourselves why. They also omit from the report that I called my lieutenant, had a long conversation with him. Reached out to Two Bridges Jail again. I'm trying to get more information, another phone number. I do call Robert Card right here at 10:01, and I'm not able to speak with him. You'll see that I wind up talking to Lieutenant Quinn again at 10:30. I've asked at this point for another deputy to come out from home because I'm going to be tied up for an unforeseen amount of time. I'm going to be tied up potentially all day. Deputy Mark Anderson is called out from home, and he comes out and covers the road. Then I'm finally able to talk to the guy whose hairs stood up on the back of his neck. Very quickly at 10:35, we had an 18-second conversation. That's an answered call from him because I've tried to reach out to him through other sources. And I say, I've got to call you back. I'm right in the middle of something. I had the other phone going and the radio was going. And then I call him back. We have a 3-minute, 18-second phone call where he told me, among other things, that the military is looking to have Robert retire on the conditions he gets some mental health treatment. That was put in my report. I didn't imagine that on September 16th when I wrote it in there before the October tragedy. It's reflected here. This is proof. This is what the Commission has. How is it that we jump from 10:31, I'm talking with Saco PD, 10:31, Saco PD, and then I jump to 10:46. They're missing some steps. They do that on purpose. There's a lot that happened between 10:31, Saco PD, there's Sergeant Moat, and then eventually, I do talk to Captain Reamer at 10:46. They omit that. That piece of the tape that I just played for you from our cruiser conversation, they also choose to omit that from the conversation that I have with Captain Reamer. That's this spot down here, 10:46, Skolfield and Reamer spoke by phone. They leave out the grain of salt aspect. Why do they do that? Those are unvarnished facts that they chose to remove from their report. They also omit from their report, Sergeant Moat testified on March 7th at 3 hours, 57 minutes and 18 seconds, he got the text from Sergeant Hodgson at 2:04 in the morning. This is a minor transgression, but it just shows sloppy work. This is not a fact. They did not get it at 2:30 in the morning. They got it at 2:04. Here is the text. It says it right on it. That's sloppy work. Notice they don't put the time either. He testifies he sees the text when he wakes up, like a normal person who sleeps during the night, at 7:17. 3 hours, 57 minutes, 18 seconds. At 7:17, he sees the text. The commission chooses to omit it from their report, hide this unvarnished fact from the public on purpose. Because that's 7 hours. That's a long time to be so concerned the hairs in the back of your neck are standing up and doing nothing about it. The commission chooses not to recognize that. If you go back, I'll go back to the voting here. Deputy Anderson comes out, he covers my zone, and I continue to do other things. If you go back and watch the testimony myself on January 25th, you'll see that I, along with others, were failed to ask a question about, we were asked a wide variety of questions regarding trainings and programs related to mental health resources for those in need. Please note that not one commission member asks about my knowledge of the progressive treatment program. Why do you think that is? If you would, folks, take a look at this thank you letter from the Maine Hospital Association. They specifically thank Dr. Bader for her stewardship and the work in support of the group in support of LD 1993 and 1994, both bills to strengthen the progressive treatment program. This Dr. Bader is the same Dr. Bader that Governor Mills picked to be on the commission. Why was she picked and then told why did she not bring it up? It's to deflect blame. Dr. Bader was and is familiar with the progressive treatment program, but not once asked why it was not utilized or if any member of law enforcement knew of its existence. Why? I suspect that she, along with her commissioners, her co-commissioners, were told to not bring it up. Had I been given the facts of Robert Card's condition, all of the facts of Robert Card's condition, which I was not, had I been trained on the progressive treatment program, maybe I or a number of others could have helped the process get started to get Card the help he needed and avoided the tragedy in Lewiston. Beginning the yellow flag process was impossible, as outlined in Sheriff Joyce's letter to the Judiciary Committee. This is also Exhibit B, which the Commission had, and has chose to hide from you, the public, where he says the yellow flag law was essentially useless in a very similar situation that I had. You folks in the media are happy to take a look at that. I am so angry at Governor Mills. She would go so low to make this horrific event a political, going so far to, without words, endorse her buddy, Joel Mary, to be sheriff. It is so shamefully appalling to not provide the unvarnished facts and alter actuality in the timeline of what occurred so the victims and their families can know the truth. Sheriff Mary, you sat back and done relatively nothing knowing these inaccuracies, omitted details, facts that are wrong in the Commission's report, and have done relatively nothing to illuminate the public. Shame on you. We needed leadership more than ever during those difficult times. Do you folks have any questions so far?
All three of us will speak and then we'll do questions together.
You got it.
Hi, my name is Bob Staples. This is my son right here. On Tuesday, August 6th, our son Brett was tragically killed by being struck by a train. Brett suffered from schizoaffective disorder. His mother and I tried for years to get him help. Help wasn't there. 8 days after Brett died, John Nutting told me about the Progressive Treatment Program, or PTP as I'm going to refer to it from now on. That program might have helped Brett. No one told us about the PTP. 2 years ago, Brett went out in negative 20 degrees weather in his stocking feet and got severe frostbite on his feet. He lost half of one foot and half of a toe on the other. Brett was clearly a danger to himself. No one at Maine Med told us about PTP. No one at Houston Commons, where he was staying, which is run by Spurwink, told us about PTP. No one at Spring Harbor, where he had gotten into 5 years ago, told us about PTP. No one at Franklin Memorial Hospital, where we took him after an overdose and where he broke a nurse's hand, told us about PTP. We do not blame any of them for not telling us, as the problem lies with the failed policies of Governor Janet Mills' administration. Governor Mills has made sure that people who can make referrals to PTP have not been trained or even made aware of the program. The two biggest groups who can make referrals are medical and law enforcement. Since Brett's death, I've talked to about 70 people in the medical and law enforcement fields. Only one had vaguely heard of the program. The rest were surprised that Maine had a program like PTP and could have helped many people that they deal with who are in crisis. Because of Governor Mills' failed policies, my wife and I are forming a nonprofit to raise the public awareness and train designated referrers to increase the use of all current and future statutes and programs that would increase the likelihood that someone suffering from a brain disorder would stay on their treatment plan and have successes in their lives. The purpose of the nonprofit is to address the problems of brain disorders and the impact they have on individuals, families, the community, and law enforcement. Brain disorders are not well understood, and their impacts are not often known until after a tragic event. The 4 goals of the nonprofit are: 1, educating families and members of the public about the causes and impacts of brain disorders; 2, informing the public, caregivers, and law enforcement personnel of ways to assist people with brain disorders to be successful members of the community; 3, informing and educating law enforcement and crisis personnel of the options under Maine law to address behaviors related to brain disorders; and 4, advocating for policies, laws, and programs to address the problem. We're still in the formative stages of the nonprofit. We actually hope to file with the state in the next week or 2. Once we're approved by the state, we hope to begin raising money to accomplish our goals. We are putting together a board. Our board will include people from medical, law enforcement, parents, lawyers, and others with a skill set to help. Thank you for your time. Next up, the Honorable John Nutting.
As a member of the Maine Senate, myself and State Senator Peter Mills, the lead co-sponsor of the PTP bill, passed this bill in 2003 and then enhanced the bill in 2010. And it was a very controversial bill amongst some, but the vote in the Senate was 32-3. The vote in the House was 117-31. They were overwhelmingly bipartisan votes. In 2022, there was a study group about strengthening the PTP law. And I was a member, along with many other people, on that study group. That study group studying the PTP law was headed up by Dr. Bader from DHHS. That's why I find it so amazing that she served through the whole commission process, never once mentioned a question about PTP to any of the people testifying. As a result of that study group, 2 bills were presented to the legislature, LD 1993 and LD 1994. Both bills passed the legislature unanimously. 1994 is a bill to create a legal fund for non-state hospitals and law enforcement to use to institute a district court PTP hearing. So the legislature weighed in very firmly, unanimously, that they wanted the bill expanded. They wanted more people, more groups to use it. And so that bill has become law. It had to become law without her signature because she wouldn't sign it in, Governor Mills wouldn't sign it into law, but it did become law and has been implemented. LT 1993 was an even more interesting bill to Peter Mills and myself and other members of the commission. The 1993 bill was the bill to have a PTP monitor and to charge the DHHS to undergo a training initiatives about PTP with initiators of the law. That study group expected it to be paid for in-house from the 18 members of DHHS's Mental Health Services Treatment and Recovery Team. That's what we were told. When the bill came out to actually have votes on the House and Senate floor in 2022, all of a sudden it had a $272,000 fiscal note, and they had to hire one individual for $168,000 to do this monitoring and training. And of course that killed the bill because of funding, because nobody in the commission that had been meeting for several months on this issue suspected that, felt that was justified at all. They have 18 people in that treatment and recovery team and could have easily done a half-day training for the sheriffs and half-day training for the chiefs of police and a half-day training for the district attorneys and a half-day training for the psychiatric group homes, et cetera, like that. That's what was called for. The other thing I also feel compelled to speak about is a policy director of the Maine chapter of the National Shattering Silence Coalition. Things are happening fast in this front. As we speak, the attorneys representing the victims of Lewiston are going to court to try to get a copy of the 132-page discharge papers from Four Winds Hospital on Robert Card. Now, Brian McMaster from the commission on the morning of July 15th, told me personally that the Lewiston Commission had received the 132 pages of discharge planning from Maine's Attorney General, because Maine's Attorney General had got it from New York State. And our group has totally in support of if the victims' families want to get a copy of the 132 pages of the discharge planning. But we feel very strongly that the general public deserves the right to read the discharge report from Four Winds Hospital and to read what they wanted the state of Maine to do to keep Robert Card stabilized. Because when he was released on August 3rd as a private citizen, he was stable on olanzapine. And we feel that having the public be able to read this Four Winds discharge report will kind of clear a lot of the smoke away from the smoke screen that's been tried to be put on this issue, that it's just about guns, guns, guns. It's really about staying on their treatment plan. Robert Card met every criteria for the treatment plan, for the PTP plan, to stay on it. And so it's very, very frustrating to us, but we're hopeful. We also have found out that the Maine Press Association is trying to take legal actions to make sure that the public gets a copy and gets a chance to read this discharge plan that clearly stated that they wanted Robert Card to be kept on this treatment plan. Now, I served in the Army Reserves myself a few years ago, back in the 70s. And our Commander Boothbay, at the end of our 2 weeks active duty training every summer, when we ran Fort Dix for 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, would, when we got back to the reserve unit in Lewiston, really went to great lengths to make sure we understood that when our active duty training was done, that we were a private citizen the next 11 and a half months. And that's been that way since 1908, when the Army Reserve federal law was passed. Now, they may change that law in the future, and frankly, I'd be fine with me if they did. But when on August 3rd, when Robert Card was released, he was a private citizen. They'd extended his active duty until his hospitalization was finished, which was fine. And it was really up to the state of Maine to make sure that he stayed on his treatment plan. Now, that involves law enforcement and everybody in the medical community and the families out there knowing that PTP law exists, which is a supported court order system, that you will stay on your treatment plan with supports in order to stay in the community. And if you stop your treatment plan, you're green papered to a hospital. And so people have an over 90% rate of compliance under the PTP plan. So a lot is happening on this issue. This is even happening today, and I wanted to bring it forth in this press conference that we're in support of the victims getting this 132 pages, but we feel strongly the public deserves to know what's in it as well. And so thank you very much, and any one of us are happy to answer any questions you might have.
Sergeant Skolfield, when you made contact with Robert Card, do you try to pull the yellow flag laws? And can you explain to me what that was like, and were there any challenges with that?
First of all, I never actually had contact with him. I attempted contact. I do believe he was likely home. His car was in the yard, could hear movement inside, likely a person. From what I understand, he lived alone. So I had every reason to believe it was him. Knocked on the door, talked through the door, no engagement. At that point, my hands are tied. If you can't start the yellow flag process. One of the requirements for starting yellow flag, unlike PTP, was I need to be able to go, you're in protective custody. Back then, the commission is not honest when they tell folks I could have started the yellow flag process. That's a lie. And you folks, one of you folks can take that home with you. Sheriff Joyce spells it out clearly. They had a similar incident on December 5th, post-shooting, where they put more effort than any other law enforcement agency in the state of Maine to try to begin the yellow flag process, working with the prosecutors, getting a warrant that they knew that they weren't going to get signed off on. When they took it to the judge says, no, warrant denied. So, and keep in mind, while I was trying to make contact, I hadn't talked to Moat and Reamer yet. After I talked to them, they changed my mindset entirely from where I was headed, and I reached out to the family as a failsafe.
Yeah, I think if I could follow up on that. That's the difference between the PTP law and the yellow flag law. If a judge and the family had gone to a judge and concerned about Robert Card's psychological state, and a judge had ordered a PTP evaluation and a PTP district court hearing, and I distributed to everybody here the simple PTP application form that any member of law enforcement can fill out. The fundamental difference is if a PTP hearing is scheduled, then the individual must be brought in for evaluation. It's not optional. You don't have to have them come outside and lay a hand on it. PTP is different. It's stronger. It's easier to administer. And so it would have been easier to have him come forward for a PTP evaluation hearing, much easier than a yellow flag process.
Do the upgrades to the yellow flag law make it easier to use it?
The upgrades since after the shooting made it more like the PTP law. But at that time, you know, if they don't come outside, there's nothing you can do with a yellow flag, but there is something you can do. You can knock on the door and get them and bring them in for evaluation under PTP. Yes.
Mine is for Sergeant
Yes.
Skolfield. You're saying that you wish you knew more about this, about PTP leading up to the tragedy. The report says that your office, the sheriff's office, could have sought an involuntary commitment or pursued the yellow flag order. So why are you suggesting this other option when the report makes clear you had other options, you just failed to use them?
They do say that. They're not being honest. Go back and read the law. The first step to yellow flag was protective custody. That's step one. But if they're inside their dwelling, they have Fourth Amendment rights. I can't go kicking the door in. Had I kicked the door in and we engaged in any sort of a scuffle and he broke his arm, I'm liable for that. And there's case law that supports that. So the PTP program is another avenue. You're basically getting a court order, if I understand this correctly, that the court is saying, Sergeant, Corporal, go see said subject. It's a court order. And we have to then. So now you have that legal mechanism to do it. The governor and the commission, they're lying to you. That's bold, blunt words. Read that. It spells it out clearer than any other incident.
Is there a date on that?
There is no date. It was after December 5th, and it was to the Judiciary Committee.
I have another follow-up. You're saying that the commission is omitting information, that they're not including evidence that you say you have, that you did try longer than just a few minutes to reach Robert Card, to have that face-to-face interaction with him. You had an opportunity to share testimony, so wasn't it on you to try to prove that you did try to contact him for longer?
I did, and I did tell him that. I told him I was there for hours. They have the radio logs. They have my camera footage. You've all seen the camera footage. If you look in the upper right-hand corner, it's got a date and time stamp. I can't alter that. The only one that can change the date and time stamp is an administrator who can access that portion of our video system. And I was a little surprised that no one from the press had caught that from my cruiser cam video. They say that I only tried for 16 minutes. That's not true. I stood outside his door for a period of time, but I did not stand outside it for 2 hours knocking on it. I backed away where I could observe his driveway and continued from there. You can see one of the phone calls was placed to him.
You say that the commission is acting basically in a partisan manner. What motivation would the independent commission have to act in that way?
Again, they were appointed by the governor, right? They were all appointed by the governor. This PTP program has kind of been a thorn in her side for a while. She clearly doesn't like it. How come it wasn't brought up? Dr. Bader knew about it. Go back and watch the testimony from January 25th. They never ask about it. They ask about a variety of other programs and DHHS tools in the toolbox, many of which we've never heard of either. But they never mention PTP. Why is that? And that's a question that I think that the governor should be asked.
You've accused the governor of being political in your statements and supporting your opponent this November. And you said your comments are not political, but this conversation is happening, this press conference is happening about a month before the election.
Yeah, it is, and it's not by design. If it was after the election, I'd still be having it. The governor's comments were made on September 6th. We've met. We've tried to do it. We would have liked to have done it sooner. I would have liked to have done it more quickly. However, when would you like us to have a press conference like this? On November 6th? I mean, we could, but I think it's appropriate for people to know the information sooner rather than later as things start fading into, memories fade and things become part of the background. Again, this isn't about votes. This is not. I want people to know the information and what our governor and what her commission did. They got things wrong, and they did so purposely. That's a big deal. And unfortunately, that's a disservice to the victims and their families who should know the truth and how things are going to proceed forward. Clearly, lawsuits are coming. We know that. And this evidence will unfold
wanting this PTP program to work or even be known about or utilized by folks?
I'm going to
like
let
others?
Senator Nutting answer that because I think he's got a better handle on it.
We found out in December of 2023, and I'm talking about we, the National Shattering Silence Coalition members in Maine, that the state of Maine is paying the Peer Support Advisory Council and the Peer Alliance to advise the state of Maine on the management of the mental health programs in our state. And those two groups have worked against the PTP law now, I've witnessed, for 23 years. They don't think anybody should ever be court ordered. If I had $5 for every time I've been told by a member of those groups that it's someone's right to be psychotic, I could buy a lot of funerals, a lot of flowers for people's funerals. Because that's what happens usually when they stay off their treatment plan. Nothing happens, tragedies happen. It may not be like times 18, it may be just one here or two there, or in young Mr. Card's case. And so those groups are in the department full time, and they don't like the program. Dr. Skinner from the psychiatrist has testified many times before the legislature's Health and Human Services Committee that about 60% of schizophrenics and 30% of bipolar have something called anosognosia, a lack of awareness of their illness. Now that means that 60% of bipolar and 30% of schizophrenics do figure it out and do gain insight and do realize they need to be in a treatment plan, which is wonderful. But for those groups to say that everybody's going to be able to figure it out is not the case. And so I think that's where the opposition to the plan comes from. LD 1994, the fund for expanding the program so that law enforcement and non-state hospitals could have their legal fees paid for to initiate a PTP hearing, because there's some work to be done. This is an evidentiary hearing in front of a district court judge. And that did become law without a signature after she was told that if she vetoed it, it would be overridden because it passed unanimously. In 1997, there was a study done by Attorney General Janet Mills about why were so many people with brain disorders being shot and killed by law enforcement in the state of Maine. And their number one recommendation in 1997 was for the state of Maine to use the PTP plan more than we have been using it. And in effect, we're using it less today than we were then. I'm familiar with Judge Milton Mack, who runs Kevin's Law in Michigan. That's kind of each state calls their PTP plan something different. Michigan calls it Kevin's Law. 48 states have a court-ordered plan for those with lack of insight. And Judge Mack just pointed out that in Michigan, in Genesee County, which is their largest county, it's a county of 400,000 people in Michigan. He just pointed out that there's 800 people under Kevin's Law in Genesee County, Michigan. So 800 out of 400,000. We have 1.35 million people in Maine. And the last we saw, Dr. Bader did the research and did it in 24 hours, thank goodness, and told us that in Maine we have 75 people on the PTP plan. You can see the huge difference from state to state. And so that affects the numbers of tragedies we have in Maine. Thank you.
Sergeant Skolfield, obviously you tried to make contact with Robert Card. Your name's in the report. For lack of a better term, Governor Mills called you out in her press conference. So I have to ask, do you feel remorse to what happened last October?
Of course I feel bad for the families. Do I feel responsible for it? No, based on what was given to me at the time. I wish that I had been given the tools and the information to do something more, do something different. Again, Look at my commitment and my mindset before I spoke to Moat and Reamer. They told me something different. We've heard the tape of Captain Reamer rather. Sergeant Moat, I did not record. When he testified before the commission, he had amnesia. He suddenly couldn't remember our conversation other than I asked to go up the chain of command and that it was a very short phone call. That was his testimony. I might have the words backwards, but that's what he testified to. I watched it many times. Well, that was a 3-minute, 18-second phone call. Not as short as you think. And you can't change the fact that it was, the unvarnished fact, that it was 3 minutes, 18 seconds. And again, like I said in my earlier, I put in my report, the military was working with Card to get a retirement, working on getting him retired on conditions he gets some mental health treatment. We all know that Captain Reamer did not say that. I errantly gave credit to Reamer for saying that when I wrote my report. And I acknowledge that to the commission. Who's the other person I talked to? Moat. And Moat suddenly had amnesia about making that comment too. I didn't imagine it when I wrote it on September 16th, but the commission chose to omit it to remove that unvarnished fact. I'm getting real hung up on unvarnished fact because Governor Mills really hounded on it, and they leave out all these facts. It tells a different story. It's like saying, Jackie, you beat your neighbor's dog to death with 2 fatal blows from a baseball bat. You sound like a horrible person, don't you? As a result of your neighbor's dog attacking your 4-year-old daughter in the sandbox and dragging her around by her throat. That changes the whole tone. I'm not saying the extent is that extreme, but there is a change in the tone of what I did and why I did it. I've been a good cop for 31 years. And to suddenly think that now all of a sudden I'm just going to go, I tried and walk away. That's not at all true. And she knows it. And so do that committee. So do every member in that commission.
Sergeant, I think one of the implications of the commission report and to some extent the Army report was that you didn't push, I guess, more aggressively to try to take him into protective custody.
Mm-hmm.
You said that you couldn't kick down his door, that would have been a constitutional violation. But are you saying that there were no other options for you at that time to try to take him into protective custody to push harder to do that? Because that would have allowed you to begin the yellow flag process.
So there was another option, right? So remember Moat? We talked about him a lot. He was so concerned the hair stood up on the back of his neck, right? We're not going to argue that. He testified to that. He was told in that 3-minute, 18-second phone call, I'm at a wall. He won't come out. He won't engage with me. He knew I couldn't go in because Moat himself is a cop. Been a cop in Ellsworth for, 24 years, I think is what he testified to. At that point, he could have said, I didn't want to do this, but Card is enough of a danger that I now have to have press charges. That would have triggered charges to be pressed either through Saco or Ellsworth or wherever Moat was to feel the concern of those threats being real, or where the threats were made. The commission never really pins down where the threats were made other than it was on Lisbon Street. They don't say whether it was Lewiston or Lisbon. They could have pursued charges and gotten a warrant. That would have allowed me to go through the door legally with them or on their behalf, but it would have been up to them. Now, here's my theory on that. Had they pressed charges, that would have jammed up their buddy. Remember, Robert Card is still their coworker, their colleague, their friend, who's thinking about retiring. And from my understanding, I've never served in the military myself, but I've talked to several people that have, that would have been detrimental to his retirement had he been charged with a crime. So they had a decision to make. Did they really believe it was going to happen? Did they really need to do it and do the right thing? These guys that are cops, that took the same oath that I took, and think that he's okay? Because 5 weeks went by. Nobody called my superiors and said, Sergeant Skolfield is really dropping the ball here. We are truly concerned about Robert. They could have conveyed that message to me as well. They could have said, no, dude, this is the real deal. We're worried about him. Nope, it was completely the opposite that was portrayed to me. I could have camped out there all day. Remember, I made arrangements to do so and get him leaving the house. But after speaking to his commanding officers, cops, police officers, veteran police officers, they toned it down. Their testimony does not align with their actions. And a person of average intelligence can see that. Did that answer your question?
Any other questions anybody has? here again, what Bob Staples, who's just tragically buried his son, starting this nonprofit to raise awareness of the medical community, of law enforcement, of parents, that there is another option. We regard it as compassionate care for somebody with lack of insight is a supported court order. Isn't just doing nothing until a tragedy happens. So again, thank you very much for coming. We're around if anybody wants to talk to us further one-on-one. Again, thanks very much for coming today.
You guys want that? You can have it. It's the only copy of it. Good job.
Good job.
No, you did well.